This just dropped minutes ago, so we're all just going over this information, absorbing it, trying to determine what's new, what's important.
Stop me if you've heard this. A federal judge in D.C. has released the most comprehensive narrative to date of the 2020 election conspiracy against Trump.
What did he ask you? What did he say to you when he came on the line?
In it, they outlined Trump's private criminal conduct. That phrase is important after the Supreme Court gave him immunity for official conduct.
If the president decides that his rival and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
In the new brief, Jack Smith argues that Trump's conduct was private in nature and not covered by immunity. They reiterated the allegations against Trump with literally mountains of evidence. The filing describes how Trump and his aides planned to challenge the election results far in advance of Election Day and then pressured Mike Pence to reject Electoral College votes on January the 6th. In one passage, Trump replied, "So what?" when he was told Pence could be in danger at the Capitol. The question is, what's next?
So I think what you're going to see is this is going to go from the court of law to the court of public opinion. And I would expect that the former president, as his attorneys have, he will try to argue that releasing this is some form of election interference. Again, this case is not expected to go to trial anytime soon. If former President Trump is reelected, this case is expected to be dismissed by his attorney general.
Wait, stop right there. That's so important. Trump will tell his attorney general to drop charges against him. Now, forget for a moment that for the last half century, the president has allowed the attorney general autonomy to investigate and prosecute crimes without interference. Trump fired Comey and Barr the first time they showed any motivation to seek justice while Trump was president.
During that Oval Office meeting with senior Russian officials last week, President Trump ripping into the FBI director he'd just fired, calling James Comey crazy, a real nut job. According to the New York Times, that was read a document summarizing the meeting. Explaining the firing, Mr. Trump said, "I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off."
Told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud.
Trump is saying it out loud. He'll only appoint people who do exactly what he says. That is, if you can understand what he says.
And she wrote the most beautiful story you've ever seen. It was a love story about Melania and myself, a love story in People magazine. But is this election interference?
So the idea of releasing a long narrative like this from prosecutors, highly unusual, and his lawyers have argued, as they really have in all of his criminal cases, that any effort to release additional evidence is an effort to interfere with the election. Now look, there's no precedence for this. I mean, this is just such an extraordinary circumstance, but I think that's what you're going to see next. The former president is going to argue that allowing even a redacted version of this filing to be released to the public is going to potentially hurt him in the election, and that this is part of this larger conspiracy that he alleges by judges, by prosecutors, to hurt his chances in November. So I would expect that after initially we look and find the new details, I think that this is absolutely going to be used again in the court of public opinion to once again try to frame the former president as a martyr or a victim of the justice system.
Dude,
he will try to argue that releasing this is some form of election interference.
Dude, he's been indicted 91 times by juries from New York to Georgia. The courts, they've done everything but directly interfere. Judge Cannon in the documents case and the Supreme Court offered him immunity. If that's not election interference, how can this be? Releasing papers warning the entire world what a menace this guy is?
Evan, obviously, this is notable given the longstanding DOJ policy around prosecutions on figures that on candidates close to election time. But this isn't exactly a new prosecution, right?
Right, exactly. And by the way, we're coming up just a few more days before essentially the Justice Department is supposed to go quiet. They have a 30-day unwritten rule, a 30-day quiet period that begins effectively on Saturday, right? Because you're about a month away from the presidential election. And so the Justice Department really would not be able to release any of this, in the next 30 days.
Rules rules? Who's playing by the rules? Trump is promising to arrest Biden, Cheney, Cohen, prosecutors, Zuckerberg, the media. He will abolish the EPA and the Department of Education. And we're worried about an unwritten rule near the election? Come on, people.
All the things that we've alleged against Donald Trump that are in the new indictment, the slimmer indictment that was returned a couple weeks ago, all of these were personal or political acts and not official acts. There's a quote in here from Jack Smith that I think sums up his approach very well. He says, quote, "The through line of Trump's efforts was deceit. The through line of these efforts was not doing his job as president. He was acting deceitfully." So Jack Smith here, this is his brief, and he's saying to Judge Chutkan, all the stuff that's in our new slim down indictment, it's all okay. None of it is entitled to immunity, and we should be able to proceed to trial on it.
How did this motion come about? It's important for folks to understand why it is that Jack Smith was, and he was given a green light by Judge Chutkan to file this and have it be released.
He certainly was. And there are a couple unusual things about the way this happened, Jake. So first of all, ordinarily, when it comes time for motions, the defense goes first. The prosecution puts in its indictment. The defense says, here's what we object to in the indictment, and the prosecution responds. Here, Jack Smith said a few weeks ago, Judge Chutkan, we want to go first. And Judge Chutkan actually said, well, that's quite unusual, but she let them go first. And the effect of that now is we essentially have Jack Smith's case, at least on paper, at least the parts that have not been redacted, 30 some days before the election, whereas we might not otherwise have had it. Now, Donald Trump's team will respond to this. They will say essentially all the stuff that he is accused of doing was all part of his official job, including the Mike Pence conversations. And Jake, I should note, like you, I'm not all the way through this thing, but just to give a taste of what Paul and others are looking at, there is a list of conversations fairly early on in this brief. It's just a bullet point list, a page and more, of conversations that Donald Trump had with Mike Pence, and some of